right, TK, welcome back to another edition of Travis and Justin Talk to Each Other for a while. And over the course of the last week, I forgot how beneficial it was to have human interaction during the COVID times, and had several old, like we used to do in the academy a lot, what I consider whiteboard meetings, where you just come up with a topic and you start flowing ideas with good, smart people. And we had some visitors coming through the academy this week. A couple guys from the Mets just kind of strolled in, and I love the collaboration that we've had over the past several years. And I think about one of the things I was worried about when we went with one team exclusively. You remember how awesome it was 2 or 3 years ago when we probably literally had all 30 teams come in our building and we didn't have to go out to them. You think about, man, how much time and effort would we have to spend seeking out all these really good people in the industry, and how beneficial it was for us just to be able to, I mean, they were coming in to see what we were doing and probably try to learn something from us, but at the same time, we were learning just as much from them of being able to do that. So it was really cool this week to have like a real in-person meeting and talking about a few subjects that we're trying to figure out more. Like, well, when guys lose the barrel, what can we do? Which I feel like is one of the hardest things to fix on hitters. What can we do to speed up that process? And just kind of like hear other people's thoughts on that. And that's something that I have really missed over this COVID time of doing everything via Zoom, which just looking back on it now, like really stinks. Like you can only do so much over a computer screen. I know you missed out on that, but man, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's, we had talked to like earlier, I think our second or third episode or whatever it was, and we were talking about like the ABCA time and not being around, being able to sit and just talk to people and hear stories and just hear as to what they're thinking on and what they're doing and how they're navigating it. And, going back, it was like there was that period of time where I feel like every week we had somebody new in, and getting to hear different people's perspectives and being able to understand kind of even how their brain works. Like, how do they think about the things that are probably relatively similar to the way we think about it, but just the way that their brain processes it, how they put it out, and then just kind of sitting back and taking your thoughts and kind of meshing them with their thoughts, and then, adding new thoughts and navigating that has always been, like, for me, I guess that's kind of where I find my brain and heart kind of always wants to go to, is to be creative, to hear things, to try to come up with a better mousetrap, as it were, to fix issues, whether it be in a swing or in a throw, or even though my background isn't, initially in anything to do with, the gym, strength training, stuff like that, is to find better ways to use the gym time as well as a transfer portal to the cage. So, not taking just traditional lifts or traditional movements, but finding ways to take those movements and make them a little bit more specific to what we're trying to get done in the cage or on the field. And then bouncing those ideas off and testing those on some players, then getting some more, smart minds to come in and be like, hey, what do you think about this? I've been playing with this for, the last month in the gym and with my players. And, here's kind of some of the results I've been getting, what do you think about this? And, it's hard to do on your own. It's easier to do when you have other smart people to, kind of talk you through their thoughts. And sometimes, you get really blinded to what you want to be an answer. You're like, oh, I think I got something here. And then you blind yourself a little bit sometimes to other things. And then other people step in and say, well, have you thought about this? And you go, oh man, you know what? I haven't thought about it that way. So, being around people is definitely, a benefit. And, for me now, and I know you probably a little bit less because I know you're stuck being in front of your computer, not necessarily in the facility the way you were before. We've got, like, shout out to our team, man. Like, honestly, like we got some really great people on our staff, and we've got some really good interns that have come through that still are around and do such a great job. We've got a guy on staff now, his name's Colin, that, man, I swear Colin probably asks me at least one or two questions a day.
Yeah.
And
he's in there when I'm in there in the morning, and he's like watching the pro guys work out and asking questions. We have some young guys on that staff that are so much farther ahead than we were. I know they have like resources to do it, but like we have a kid, Jake Miller's probably 21. That dude just lives in, like, we have our own research team now. He's in there like digging into things that I haven't dug into yet. He's like, "What do you think about this?" It's like, keep studying it. He goes down some wormholes, kind of like you once in a while, where it's like, dude, there's too much variability there. Like, stick to something simple, study it, come up with an answer. But I'm thinking, as I was talking to those guys from the Mets, it's like, we have people in this place that every team would want to hire because they know how to do all the data analysis. They can throw BP, they can troubleshoot tech, like real. And kudos to them. That's just them getting it and like being interested in wanting to dig into it. But yeah, it's really, really cool to see that. I wrote some things down while you were talking there. You said something like, when you're by yourself, you do things your own way, and you get very comfortable doing that. And you need people on the outside to challenge you. So if you're a facility owner or you're a high school coach, like, the whiteboard meeting for me is some of my favorite time of coming up with new ideas or challenging your own thoughts. Like, you have to do that. You have to challenge your own thoughts. And I wrote one of them down as we were talking about yesterday. You and I have talked about a scap load for 10 or 12 years before it became commonplace. And the term load on the back end of that's probably a bad word to put in that phrase. But I think back to the dominance of hip and shoulder separation, the exploration of that. And I feel like what you and I are trying to do now is remove as much hip and shoulder separation as quickly as possible, because I feel like hip and shoulder separation hurts more players than it helps. And before I get into a couple of the drills or what we were thinking on that, just give me your thoughts on hip and shoulder separation for pitchers and hitters.
Yeah, that's actually, I probably have that conversation once a day. I had that conversation yesterday with a kid that plays actually within our travel organization that was in for a lesson. Very, very hypermobile kid. Like, I'm talking, like, I tease him because one time he was hitting, and I said, "Man, you are over rotating way too much." I said, "Think about it this way, like, you can only turn in right now, just cue wise, you can only turn in so that your shoulders can stay square, or not shoulders, so that both your eyes can see the pitcher." I just kind of left it that way because, we were just doing T-work setup at the beginning, and you know how the over rotation T-work comes. So I was just like, "Listen, man, like, imagine you can only turn in that far." And he goes like this, and he's sitting here, and he goes like this. He goes, and his chin, I got a picture of this. His chin goes all the way to here.
He's like, it's like The Exorcist, where the girl's head spins all the way around backwards, huh?
I told him he's like an owl. I said, "Bro, like, how do you even do that? Like, that's crazy." But he's that way everywhere. Like, he's hypermobile everywhere. And, I sit and watch him throw. And as a thrower, I'm like, this dude is going to throw hard. I told him, I said, your only job early on right now, because he's still relatively young. When I say relatively young, he's, sophomore in high school. I said, you just need to learn how to control that full range of motion. Like, you need to have strength enough to control that entire huge range of motion. And if you do, you're going to have a chance to do some wild things on the mound. We've also sat down and had the conversation because he does the same thing as a hitter. And I told him, I said, "Man, you are going to struggle to survive as a hitter because it just takes you too long to get through that entire range of motion. You're going to have to cheat so early to try to get to balls because it takes so much." So yesterday he came in and threw and hit with me. So he comes in for an hour. And, you know, we started on the mound and we were going through some work. And again, it was like, we're only learning how to control that range of motion. How do we utilize that range of motion to your advantage? You know, how do you coordinate the timing of how to get in and out of that motion? So I've been saying that a lot, like, how do we get in and out of positions? And that's really just like understanding the fluidity of movement is how do I get in and out of a position versus how do I just get into a position? It's how do I
way easier to do for a pitcher than a hitter too, by the way.
It is because you can control it, but because the range of motion is so big, the timing of it becomes difficult. Because if you mistime it, it's almost just as bad.
That's where you see the lack of syncing up with so many young hitters. Like we say see it being in sequence, and that's not necessarily the end game for every hitter because guys that are hypermobile are rarely in a traditional sequence. But being able, even if they are in a different pattern, a hypermobile pattern, which is often going to be the torso, the shoulder ahead of the core, being able just to be consistent with that move because it's the lack of consistency that those hitters fight.
Well, and that's what we did on the hitting side. It basically became, you know, I said try to find where you feel like you can control that you can only go forward as a hitter. Meaning like when he would hit, he would want to go and his pelvis and hips would want to rotate, but his upper body wouldn't be ready to go because there's still so much space there and he doesn't have that, you know, complete probably rotary stability and functional ability to just get the torso to manually go on his own. So it became more of like, let's just kind of get to a position. And we started from a little bit more of a static position, which I don't typically do. And I said, from this position, you can only go forward. There can be no, you go and the hands lay off or the upper body still waiting to go or the hands aren't ready to go. And it became almost more of a thought of like, you have to probably feel like you need to just push into the ball so that this huge long whip that you're not able to manage completely yet will beat you. And the issue is like, you know how it goes now with young kids, like the toughest thing is like, man, like I don't even think like specialty stuff was a thing when I was a kid. Like there was no, oh, you're 16, you're going to be a PO. Like that was what, like where was that a thing? But now it's like so many things are going to that. It's like, man, like, you know, you're at this point already, they're almost telling guys like you're behind in hitting by enough and you're a good enough thrower that you should just stop doing this now and go and do this. And, you know, partly like what my job also entails is that I am trying to help these kids live both sides of baseball as long as they want before somebody feels the notion to feel like they need to take it away from him. So like me having him push or feel a push, I told him, I said, you might lose a little bit of power, but you're going to be able to keep surviving as a hitter and it'll allow you time and more time to be able to keep getting better rotary control to manage this length to give you a chance to maybe hit for a considerably longer time, but you might have to give up a little bit of power in this short term so that in the next year, they don't make you a PO because then you're going to lose it. And, you know, at that point you decide, well, you know, do I go and find some team that'll let me do both? Or do I want to stay on, you know, in this program or in this, you know, school environment or however, you know, because it's coming from high schools and from travel, right? Like there's high schools that have POs, there's travel that have POs. Like it's not like it's just one or the other, you know. And that's partly the job now too. It's like I'm just trying to get this kid more time to be able to let him become a good hitter, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's something I've toyed with or torn with in talking to parents of 14, 15, 16-year-old kids is like we can put a Band-Aid on this right now for the time being, knowing that you're just not strong enough to stabilize that move. So we're going to teach you a push pattern so you can have some success as a hitter. And then knowing that at some point we're going to have to go away from that when you're strong enough to stabilize the move. And the way I kind of think about it, going into what I was talking about with the scap load, is I picture a wooden doll toy. Stick with me here and visualize this. And I have the upper body of it. So we're going to call the upper body from the bottom of the chest up. I have this wooden doll toy.
Okay.
At the bottom of it, I have it from my pelvis down. Is also a piece of the wooden doll toy. And I split it in half. There's two independent pieces. Between that, I have a slinky, a full, long, length slinky. And imagine if I held this wooden doll from its head, and the slinky and the pelvis and the legs below are just waggling back and forth. There is no control. And you could spread the slinky out. And basically what we're trying to do with that wooden doll toy is make that slinky rigid and tense versus it being so loose. And what we were talking about yesterday in the shop with the scapula of the motion of the scapula trying to connect the upper body and that slinky in the middle to the rigid lower body is completed when the scapula folds over the rib cage. So the action of, we talked about the scapula is a pulled back, but then it's going to fold over and it's going to come down. And that's the action that makes that slinky in the middle rigid, tight, and connects the upper body to the lower body. It's folding over the rib cage. So we were doing some creative drills with that, actually with like a kettlebell in the hand, because if you lay it off, you lose the feel. The kettlebell just like rips your supraspinatus off and like a rotator cuff tear. But just creative ways of feeling that action. We've done it with the PVC pipe and the fold over. But it also goes to think about, when we do the movement screen and how many kids 15 and under have winged scapulas that can't even have that action of connecting the upper body to the lower body because of just their lack of scapular strength causes the scapulas to be winged out. So if you have a young athlete at home and they take their shirt off and it looks like they have horns sticking out of their back, they already have a deficiency in the scapular region that won't allow their upper body to fuse to their lower body. Now, that's a very, if you want to call it physiological or scientific way of saying we need to take the hip and shoulder separation out in order to fuse the upper body to the lower body and take that slinky that is so elastic and make it very rigid. And easier to do on tighter movers, right? Because the slinky, instead of being 2 feet long, is like 3 inches long. Easier to make that rigid. Shorter amount of time to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, that's, one thing, I've been, toying with for the last few years is kind of that same thought. Like how are we able to create, how are we able to create a feel, I guess is the best way to do it, to help eliminate some of that slinky until the body gets stronger or even more aware. I think, still like talking to kids and you try to move them through stuff and, I'm still, relatively hands-on of like moving people around to help them try to feel certain movements, certain things. Because in my mind, you can manually shut down some of the space. You can't shut it all down unless you're extremely physically strong. But you can eliminate some of that slinky simply with manual body control. So whether it's utilizing your stabilizers or whatever it ends up being, like you can manually eliminate some of it. So then it's like, how do we create feel for the people that we know we're trying to buy time until they can get better strength around what they're doing to control it easier. And playing with drills. So I use a lot of like banded work. So we'll use bands and we'll work on trying to move the body with some resistance. So if you give something that's now, let's say I'm banded going away from me here, and I'm holding that resistance, and I have to move forward. It wants to keep pulling me out. How do I resist that without feeling like I have to counter my turn to resist? Because at that point, I'm not necessarily doing anything with the scap. I'm just rotating my body inward, which is what
so many of those kids do. Yeah.
Which is why you see what you see on the tee, is because the control of the resistance isn't there, and they feel like they're creating the resistance just by turning in versus by actually resisting a movement around the trunk of the body.
Yeah.
So
like counter rotation will take slack out. It's just a bad way to do it for a hitter and
for a hitter really bad. Yeah, for a hitter really bad. So I got a question for you. Going along the same line, I just kind of posed this question the other day. So imagine this analogy, and then I want you to pick which one, and then I want you to explain why you feel like it's an easier route for you to pick that answer. Okay?
Go.
So I'm going to give you two options. The first option is you have a vehicle with a massive engine, but very, very sketchy brakes. Or I'm going to give you a vehicle with an engine that's not very powerful. Maybe it's an electric engine, but just world-class brakes. And you have to pick one of those to put inside your hitter. And then you also have the opportunity to work with that hitter. So you can then work with them to cure the opposite side of whichever one. Which one do you choose, and what do you do to navigate fixing the negative aspect of it?
It depends on the age here. What's the age of the car?
Well, let's go. I'm going to give you, since you're dealing majority wise with pro athletes, let's go pro athlete.
Okay. And I hate to be wishy-washy on my answer, but I'm going to give you two different scenarios, which I would want each. If it's a younger professional athlete, patience is going to be a virtue here. I would take the bigger engine and really work like hell on accomplishing better breaks.
Okay.
If I'm an older, established professional athlete, I am, and I have one of these guys that we've had this conversation with all off season. Veteran pro at this point, small engine, concerned about the engine. There's really two guys I can think of, major leaguers, that we've had this conversation with. Fairly small engine. They're both concerned about the engine, and I'm trying to ease their mind of relaxing that concern and being more focused on the brakes. And here's why. The quality of contact and the consistency of contact, I will take over players that are constantly going to miss hit balls because their brake system isn't very good, albeit their max exit velocity is going to wow you way more, but they're just not going to be able to do it and repeat it enough times. With professional athletes, because the consistency of contact is becoming rarer and rarer in the game with more players with bigger engines and worse brakes, I feel like the ability to have a good brake system not only gets you a better time to contact because you're shortening the separation between segments, but it's giving you better direction and better distance in the zone, which in turn gives you better chance for consistency of contact. So for a younger guy, give me the chance of the engine in trying to put a better braking system in them. But even if I have 7 of those type of guys, 5 of them we're not going to be able to get right. 2 of them we will. But if you give me 7 guys with small engines, I feel like consistency of contact, and I would say small, it's still adequate to be a pro, but on the lower end of the pro spectrum, 6 or 7 of those guys are going to hit because it's more consistent path through the zone, which is going to give you more often quality of contact. So there you go.
So based on that, would you say that there is more value still in professional baseball for exit velocity over quality of contact? And that doesn't mean you're having to choose one or the other. Do you feel like there's still more value, or do you feel like organizations still have more value into guys that can just hit missiles versus guys that are just really good at squaring the ball?
Yeah, and again, I don't think there's a blanket answer for that. I think exit velocity is always going to be an attraction. And this is where I feel like scouting departments and PD need to work hand in hand of what risk are we willing to take on, and do we really feel like we're going to be able to mature this hitter with the high exit velocity, likely let's say a looser mover, low rotary stability, there's length in the swing. There's a lot of flags in there. Can we take that risk on knowing that this player is going to have a chance to hit a ball 115 miles an hour? And there is risk there. And it's a safe play to have guys that are really solid bat to ball guys. But I feel like we're in a time and place right now, and this is just my opinion. It's speculation. This has nothing to do with our pro organization or any of them. I feel like we're in a place in the game right now where we're on that ebb and flow back to those type of players. I just think that, like, 115 mile an hour exit velocity is very attractive, but are organizations at a place in the game right now to accept guys that are going to do that at let's call it a 210 to 230 clip? And to each organization, that's probably a little bit different. Or are we going to say we're fine with the guy that maxes out at 102, but his, the bat to ball average is way higher? If you have that special guy that can have the exit velocity and stabilize it, they're special. But I think of one of the more prevalent prospects in the game in the American League, and like looking at his video, the exit velocities are off the chart. I'm like, I don't see this guy ever hitting at the big league level, because there's just all those things that we just talked about. The exit velocity is there, but the consistency of contact is so poor. And there are so many like red flags in the swing mechanics because he can't stabilize his move. That I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see this guy having a ton of success. And maybe he still grows into his body and gets stronger, but that's my answer to that one.
Do you think that ever changes though? I mean, because I know that there's always the give and the take, but from the top down, if you're a kid, if I'm a high school kid and I'm deciding kind of where I'm going to take myself, because you're already starting to make decisions like, what kind of hitter am I, a little bit when you're in that age. Like your body's starting to mature a little bit, and you're starting to kind of figure out a little bit who you are. And if I'm looking at the grand scheme of it, and all the guys that I probably end up idolizing are, typically probably the guys that are getting the bigger contracts in the big leagues, because they're usually, what are deemed as the better ball players.
Yeah, and there's been studies on that. Like, there is a direct correlation to income and exit velocity. There is.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. So, like, if you're telling me, that's what I'm saying, do you think it'll ever go the other way? Because, like, it's just like for pitching. Like,
but I think those guys are the outliers, Travis. I do. I think those guys are like the 1%. There's so many underneath there that just never even get to make an income because they never get out of the minor leagues.
Well, but in the pitching realm, I think it's still a little bit different. Like, you're not just giving the $25 million contract to some dude that can just throw fuego. Like, you're giving the money to the guy that throws a little bit harder, but is a very good pitcher. Meaning, like, this guy is going to be in contention for a Cy Young. We are going to pay this guy because he is going to put wins on the board, but he also does something that's special beyond an average thrower. It's the difference between, a guy throwing 90 and having 15 wins and a guy throwing 95 and having 15 wins. The guy that's throwing 95 and has 15 wins, if everything else is relatively consistent across it, the guy that's throwing 95 is going to more than likely get the higher paycheck because he can still throw well. But as a hitter, I feel like it's completely different. Like, you're going to get guys that are going to hit 240 or 250 and get a big contract versus, do you think if there's a guy that hits 340 with a very low slug, do you think that guy is going to get a big contract or just an average size contract?
Average.
And I know you don't know the answer to that question.
I think average. I think there's still going to be a premium on slug and ISO. But I think there's just going to be, we're in a place, I think there's going to be less tolerance for really low on base percentage, even though you have a high slugging percentage. And again, that's just complete speculation, but I feel like as the game always ebbs and flows, I feel like that's probably the way the game is trending right now. And I'll bring up something else. Like, if I'm a high school player, I take this at a different perspective. I take it as I need to have high exit velocity. Because the pro guys, for the exception of the bottom 10%, all of them, 90% of them have adequate exit velocities to be a major leaguer. Doesn't mean they have to be at the top end of the spectrum, but you have enough that if other things fall into place. You could be a major leaguer. Some of them just never get strong enough, that bottom 10%, to like be a major leaguer. But a college recruiter and a pro scout are looking for different things. Like if I'm a high school guy and I want to move on past high school baseball, I better be physical enough to be physical in the game at whatever that next level looks like. So if I'm a high school player, I am, and this is more just strength training. If I'm strong enough, I'm going to have better exit velocities. I don't think it's necessarily training that way of just like maxing out my effort in the cage. I don't think that's not the way to achieve better exit velocity. The way to achieve better exit velocity is just be stronger. And I do think, and there are academies across the country and some very prominent ones that train that way. Like I'm maxing out my effort in the cage. Like that's great, but in my opinion, that's not the way to achieve exit velocity. Like all you're doing is you're gaining a couple miles of exit velocity for the detriment of performance in a game, in my opinion. Like get strong, but separate your strength from your skill work. And those are two separate things that merge together. But if you're just not strong enough and you're overcompensating on the skill side and trying to achieve your exit velocity from the skill side, you're probably negatively affecting the skill.
So if you had to, in your best guess, put a number on where somebody would want to be adequate, meaning good enough to play at that level, maybe not the superstar at that level, but good enough to keep making that jump. So let's say the number is a high school kid that is looking to be able to play, let's say, low-level Division I baseball. Like they want to be at an adequate enough speed that college is going to pay attention. Now, obviously, that means that they're doing stuff on the defensive side, or they're a good runner, or they're a good, contact guy as well. But like, what would be your best guess at what like an adequate number for exit velocity would be for a kid that's looking to be able to compete at a low or mid-level D1?
I would say the standard number with metal is going to be 100 miles an hour, but for a lower level, we're going to say like 97 miles an hour. So above 95 miles an hour. Just so we're clarifying for people that are listening,
are you saying that number is off of a ball coming
moving
in
ball.
or off of a tee?
Off a moving ball. The tee exit velocity is the dumbest measurement tool in the history of evaluation.
I get that, but for most people to understand, your exit velocity should be higher off a ball moving if you square it up than a ball that is sitting still. And the only reason I say that is, for especially, this is even directed a lot at the parents, the kids that are at home, that are constantly just trying to rip balls off a tee to get to 100. To like, I gotta get to 100, and realizing that an adequate number in your mind, if you're trying to play and get an opportunity to play collegiately at, obviously most kids are still at a young age and shoot for Division I, because that just seems like it's supposed to be where you're supposed to go. So that's the only reason why I'm using Division I versus anything else. That they think that if that number keeps climbing, that's what is single-handedly get them an opportunity for these colleges to pay attention. And that's why I want to kind of say, like, what do you think that threshold is? So let's say it is 97, and 97 off a ball moving, which let's say then in reality might put somebody closer to like 90 to 92 off a tee maybe.
But it's also like for the scout now, it's how you do it. Right? I'm looking at like, how is this 97 being achieved?
Right.
If it's there's this one academy in Chicago, Travis, that we get these players from all the time, and they're like training. I think they specifically train for the tee exit velocity drill. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And they'll turn their torso like their back to the pitcher completely, wind up, and just swing out of their shoes. It's like, that's great. You're never going to be able to hit in a game. And if I'm a college coach and I look at you just get 97 off of a tee hitting that way, like I just crossed your name off the list because that looks ridiculous and that's never going to play. It's like, how are you achieving 97? that's important to me too.
Okay, so now we've got 97 with whatever other intangibles for a high school kid to make that jump to Division I. What is in your mind kind of the adequate number to make that jump from your college to a pro level?
Not much more. From the college to the pro level, I still say like consistently over 100. Now you will get some really sexy numbers off like potential sometimes first round guys that are over 105, but it's not a big jump. And I was as you were saying this, I was thinking of a conversation I had last offseason with a major leaguer who was training after a high school kid, and this is when our hit tracks worked, and it hasn't worked for a year. We use Rapsodo now anyway, but the numbers were still up on, how the hit tracks will, if you don't turn it off, it'll have the number up there. This guy came in, big leaguer, and he goes, "Who the fuck was hitting 108?" I said, "That was a high school kid hitting 108. He goes, "You know what? I see this on Twitter all the time where these high school guys are coming up with these ridiculous numbers. And in this guy's work, this major leaguer's work, he would never get into the hundreds in his work. He'd like max out at 98 versus 108. The difference is he could do it all the time. And the 108 would happen once out of, an entire lesson where there was just so many mishits. And I think that's the difference. Like, there are some really physical high school kids that can achieve higher numbers. And you heard me say the difference between college and pros, the jump from college to pros is really only about 5 miles an hour. That doesn't seem like much of what we just talked about from going from high school to college. The difference is, again, how you achieve it and how often can you do it. So it still that combines the strength piece of this, which college kids tend to get really, really physical, but the strength portion factors into how you transfer that strength into skill versus trying to artificially create the exit velocity. I think it's a good way to bring this all back.
No, yeah, for sure. That's kind of where I was headed with it, because I think it's still important for kids and parents to kind of hear that conversation too. Like, I know it's weird because most of the time when we do these, I only think about just like literally like we're just talking. I don't even really realize that we're always recording. It's just like, oh, cool, I get to hang out with Justin today.
Yeah, this is why we started doing this. For those listening at home, we've said it on a previous podcast, but I don't assume everybody listens to every episode. We started, Travis and I, doing this because we work completely different schedules now. I'm in the facility in the morning. He's in the facility at night. And I miss the fact that we don't get to collaborate and talk baseball that often anymore. And we used to do that. Even when we were working in different buildings, we used to be able to do it on the road. And we traveled a ton. So on a 3-day weekend, Travis and I would come up with all types of ideas. I was like, man, I'm not becoming better as a coach because I don't get to talk to Travis as often. Let's just get together and talk shop once a week. And this, and we'll record it.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring up like this point, just because I know we've, now, there's going to be some people listening. And I want kids to understand the perspective of that as well. I want them to understand the importance of knowing that, yes, your exit velocity is going to matter. Nobody can sit and pretend like it's not going to matter.
No, absolutely.
It does matter.
An adequate level, correct.
But part of it is also simply time. And when I say time is literally just, in my mind, when I say time is strength. It takes time to become strong. Like, you don't get strength just because you start working out day one. Like, it takes time. And, to just keep saying like, okay, I'm going to try to get my body to have that big, huge engine in it where I can hit a ball 108 and my body's not even ready to do it. So I'm going to have to do a lot of things that aren't going to work in a sport specific movement to get to that 108. And then I'm going to go, oh crap, I can't hit a baseball. And then I'm going to get in a game and I'm going to feel like I still need to get to that 108 and I'm not going to hit well because I'm not going to be willing to go, well, now I'm going to live at 85 right now. Because in my mind, I've seen myself be 108. So I'm going to go in the game and still try to find 108. Even though I know it doesn't work, I'm going to try to find a way to make it work, and understanding to do it the right way, to understand like you might only be 87 right now. Then be 87, like go be 87, work the crap out of 87, get back in the weight room and build the ceiling higher in there. And a lot of it comes from that. And I usually, like I said, just use the word time because it takes time. You know, like I think, you know, then you talk about that difference of kids from college to pro, and man, like I feel like I got pretty strong in high school, you know, working out, and you know, I played a couple different sports, so you know, you were in the gym for multiple sports. But man, the jump I made in college in strength was astronomical compared to the jump I made in high school.
For sure.
And you know,
in your body, just age-wise, your body's in a different place. You are in the prime years to be able to do that. Yeah.
Right. So I think it's just important for people to hear and understand as they're chasing that thought. So I'm going to kind of bring it back here a little bit, you know, from where we started talking today, and then kind of like what you just brought up about being on the road. And, you know, I think, you know, one of my favorite that still stands out was us flying out and being stuck in the United Club.
Oh, that's a great story. Oh, yeah, you should share this one.
In writing on,
we wrote the entire plan down before we literally got thrown out the United Club. Go ahead. You can tell the story. I'll chip in as needed.
Oh yeah, I mean, we were sitting there, and we were obviously planning on talking a little bit. Got stranded at Midway, or not Midway.
I think we were heading to Clemson to do a consulting project. Yeah.
Yeah. Got stranded there for a little longer than we wanted to be stranded there.
Like literally 8 hours.
Yeah. Decided to go into and become members of the United Club just on a whim. Like, oh, this makes sense. Let's just do that. We travel enough.
That's $100 I ever spent. We made our $100 back that night.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. It might have been $500, but definitely.
Yeah, it was. But just sitting there, and it wasn't like just sitting there. It was like, all right, let's get some stuff out. And you know, it's funny because it's the way it always is. It's like, man, it's like, hey, I got an idea. Hey, let's talk through some stuff we got to get through anyways. And I remember you like just grabbed like a stack of napkins or whatever it was you were writing on, and just started like laying out like, all right, let's talk through some stuff. Got some stuff down here. Then we're like, hey, how is this going to lead to that? And
what I wrote for you guys listening, and this is before we interviewed for any professional team, but we knew it was coming. So this was probably, I think this is July or August, Travis, probably July. And we knew this was coming soon as the end of the big league season was approaching. And we said, if you had just carte blanche and you could write the script for player development on the hitting side in what you would consider a perfect scenario, which we would all agree that oftentimes the pro model isn't the perfect scenario, and every organization right now is trying to better that. It's like, what would you do? And we literally put it on, I think it was napkins, Travis, over a course of 8 hours. And we wrote that whole plan. I was like, man, I don't want to lose this. I know I'm going to lose these napkins. Took pictures of it. And then I literally like wrote what I envisioned a director of hitting position should look like from that conversation in the United Club over the course of 8 hours. Made our $500 back, if you know what I mean, and wrote this entire script of what I felt like this could be.
Yeah. So that's going back, like, you know, those moments of honestly, like, that's where, like, I was like, I remember you saying like, okay, there's no financial constraint. There's no time constraint. There's no, this is literally
how can we do it the best? Yeah.
You have access to every single thing in the entire world. Even if we had to make our own thing, like, hey, this isn't actually a product yet, or this isn't like something that we actually know how to collect data from yet. We don't even know if this thing, like, you can literally make things up. If you had something, you know, and going through and even be like, well, I want, instead of the tech we have, I want in-game tech, and we want this, we want that, and I would want this, and I'd want access to be able to do that. And like, you know, looking at it, you're not going to get all of it anyways, but
yeah,
just to say, listen, like, how close, if we were going to do a model, how close could you get to where you feel like if I had this and I couldn't get done what I needed to get done, then I need to rethink what I need to do. Because it was like, listen, this is, if you're telling me you gave me all this stuff, I'm telling you I can run a department that would just.
Yeah, and a huge piece of that, as you remember, was the tie-in to your strength program. Like, how do we build better hitters? And I'll say this for parents at home. I've mentioned it on this podcast. If you are spending an hour on skill in a baseball academy or on your own, you better be spending an hour on your body, because you cannot do one without the other. And I said, it doesn't mean that professional weightlifters are going to be good baseball players, because you need the skill element. But if you're not strong enough for it to matter, or oftentimes in professional baseball, we are dealing with bigger engines, which also means a bigger need for the strength side to be able to stabilize those moves.
Yeah, 100%. Those are always the best times.
I forgot about that, man. That was literally a life-changing trip. Like we thought this was probably going to happen. We were kind of preparing for it, and we kind of wrote, what do we think this should look like? That was, I think we were talking to one specific team, an assistant GM. I think I even screenshotted. I didn't, not the whole thing, because I didn't want to give up the secret sauce, but I like one piece of this and said, hey, we're in the United Club right now. We're coming up with some really good ideas. What do you think about this?
That's funny. One of my other favorite ones too was one that hasn't come all the way to fruition yet. I still think about on a regular basis, was the proprioceptive testing. I remember we did the same thing. We had that huge whiteboard inside Bradley Center. And we sat there like, all right, what can we do to figure out how to better judge somebody's proprioceptive or learning ability.
Yeah, I still think there's legs with that. I do. And I think we're pretty close.
I think there is too. Everything takes time. You know how things get sidetracked, because then it's like, okay, well, we gotta shift our focus here for now, even though we need to get back here at some point. Like, that's the stuff that goes, but like, I could probably go back to my phone right now, and the amount of screenshots that I have of whiteboards, and same thing, like whiteboards and napkins and,
taking notes on our phone. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Cause like, even if I have it on my computer, I don't always travel with my computer. So I'll take screenshots of my computer, cause I always have my phone. And that way, if I'm somewhere, I'm like, oh crap, what did I have on my computer? I'm like, oh yeah, I still got a screenshot. Or now obviously we use more. We can put through stuff through Google Docs and stuff like that. But I'm still more. That I'm still more of an old school. Like, I just keep it simple. Like, all right, I gotta go on Google Doc and I gotta do this.
I'm the same way. All of my ideas first go paper or pen to paper before I put anything digital. I just like. I'm a big fan of the yellow legal pad.
Well, that'll be definitely our next whiteboard session. I probably have like 22 different notes started on my phone of things that I need to talk through and need to start some testing.
Yeah, we need to do that. It's good. You need to take a day off of lessons and just come in in the morning and do that with us. I'll finish up this segment with this. I went to the stadium this week for the first time since last January. And I should say my office. I've been in the stadium for the games and stuff, but haven't been in my office since last January. A couple funny things. All of my stuff from spring training was packed up in a box and left in my office probably, I don't know, last April or something like that. And they were actually packing the truck. I was like, shit, I should just put this back on the truck and send it back to Arizona. But Rachel and I were walking through, and on the whiteboard in the draft room were the notes that we had taken in one of those whiteboard sessions that you were involved with. It was still up on the whiteboard probably from last January, just because nobody's been in there. Yeah, I was looking at those notes like, man. And I'll say something about those notes. We've come a long way in a year, knowledge-wise. Yeah. There was things up there. I'm like, this is. It was good stuff, but it was like, yeah, we've accomplished all of this of knowledge or proving certain things, and like we're moving on past that. While Twitterverse is still trying to figure out what vertical bat angle means. I got on there yesterday and was scrolling through. I just got 20% dumber by reading what I just read right here. Great episode. This was a good one. Travis, this is your first one kind of leading the MC. You did a great job. That was really fun.
Yeah, man. It's always good.
Who do you want to give a shout out to our fake sponsors?
Fuck, man. Now you put me on the spot. I'm gonna give a shout out to the local bowling alley where I get to Hobart Lanes over here in Indiana, where I get to live up my competitive drive now that I don't play baseball.
You're a bowler?
Yep.
I think I've bowled in my entire life one game over 100.
I mean, that's almost virtually
I think,
impossible.
I might just be a really bad athlete. For as good as I was, obviously I didn't play pro ball, but I was a good athlete. I played, 2 sports in college. I was very physical. I could really run. CrossFit athlete later in my life. I'm terrible at all. I can't play darts. I can't play pool. I'm the worst bowler in the world. I can't do anything. Am I just a bad athlete, Travis?
I don't know. That's actually, I mean, if you're gonna ask me if I had to quantify it, yes, I would be like, a good athlete should be able to
do all that stuff. That's right. Like, how can I play 2 Division I sports and be such a bad athlete? I don't know. But
wildly fast and wildly strong.
Yeah, that was about it.
Well, but think about it, right? Like it goes back to the other things we talk about all the time. It's like you could just be really
It's
good.
true. I was able to out physical the competition to a certain point. Then they're like, yeah, that just isn't going to play at a higher level. Yeah.
But think about the amount of effort and work it took for you to get those skill sets to where they were.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. I had my own cage growing up. So I definitely spent the time on the skill work. Just wasn't practicing the right things. Good episode. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace.
All right. See you, Trav. I'm heading into the academy.